Those who have been following my channel know that I've made a response video to a YouTuber known as Alpha Defense on the topic of Arjun tank. If you haven't, I suggest you to watch my previous response video because you won't have any idea what's going on. This will probably be my last response video because this one that he has made now is so full of mistakes, assumptions and misrepresentations that I think there would no longer be a point to prolong this any further. I will again leave the link to his channel and the video I'm responding to in the description and the pinned comment, so you guys can check it out for yourselves. And again, please don't harass him. You won't be just harming him, but you will also produce problems for me. Let's start with the first point he brought up, and that involves him copyright striking my first response video. Now, I'm going to talk about the law and the fair use on YouTube, so if you don't want to listen to all that, I'll put a timestamp on the screen so you can skip that part.
Part of this video was taken by one of the channel and were re-uploaded in bits and pieces. The channel was Redifact and he claims that he has done only fair use of it. However, this upload got picked up by channel copyright algorithm of YouTube and it appeared in matches. Even the latest video, to which I'll be responding later in this video, is also picked up by the match algorithm. It's important to understand how match algorithm works. In match algorithm, any video that is uploaded by any of the user anywhere in the world matches with your video will get flagged by YouTube. And all the user need to do is to go to his YouTube studio and confirm if the match is right.
To confirm if the match is right, keep this sentence in mind. We'll get back to it in a moment.
Thus it becomes very important to inform the content creator that you are using his video. So when the match prompt comes in, he knows that this one is a fair use.
Okay, this is definitely not how fair use works. In order to understand what is happening here, we first need to take a look at the actual law of fair use. Keep in mind that this kind of law does not exist everywhere, but because YouTube is under the law of the United States, this law does take effect on YouTube. So what is fair use? Fair use is a law that permits you to use copyrighted content, but in certain factors. Those include commentary, which means you're free to use copyrighted content if you are making a commentary about it or it is vital for your already established commentary. Like using a picture of something for demonstration, which is what I have been doing most of the time, using pictures other people made to provide commentary. Another one is search engines. It's irrelevant to this now. Criticism. Now this is the one we want to look at here. This means you're free to use copyrighted material if you want to criticize it, which is exactly what I did when I made my first response video, and that I'm doing now for this one. Other factors include parody, reporting and research, which is also what I have been doing on my channel, and scholarship. Fair use law is not perfect, but it exists. Now, what Alpha Defense was talking about here is the YouTube algorithm, content identification or YouTube's bot, picking up my video and notifying him. But as he says himself, he needs to confirm if the match is right. This also means that YouTube bot is asking him, hey, do you consider this to be a violation of your copyright material? And if someone doesn't understand law very well, they could just consider that as a violation. But it is not. Don't believe me? Here's the statement from YouTube directly.
Why does my content, which is clearly fair use, keep getting claimed by Content ID? Automated systems like Content ID can't determine fair use, which is a subjective case-by-case decision that can only be made by a court.
I will leave a link to this video in the description so you can learn more about fair use. This is important because YouTube needs to warn the creators if their content is being re-uploaded without commentary or criticism. YouTube bot, because it is far from perfect, can't tell a difference between videos uploaded with empty cuts or provided commentary in between. Thus, it is better to risk it and warn the original creator anyway so the creator can see if the actions are necessary. Now, what happened with the previous video is that it was copyright striked and it was left for YouTube staff, actual people, to manually review my counterclaim. But as I said in my previous video, it has been sitting under final review for months. And will you look at that? Just a couple of days ago I got an email from YouTube saying how they reviewed my counter notification and that the video does indeed fall under fair use. And they have restored it. But since I already re-uploaded the video, I put it as unlisted, but I will leave the link to the video in the description, just so there aren't any doubts. YouTube staff manually reviewed it and they concluded that it falls under fair use. So I'm sorry Alpha, but you're just wrong. You like to assume a lot of things, which you also do in the rest of your response video. I wanted to talk about this because I've also had experience with it in the past. Years ago, I made a video about the movie Fury, it's not really a good video, and I used actual footage from the movie to provide commentary and criticism, but the company's network automatically claimed my video. But knowing the law, I issued a counter notification stating how my video falls under fair use, and after a couple of months, YouTube came back to me with a response saying how the video does indeed fall under the fair use, and thus the claim was removed. But there is something to keep in mind. If you use content someone else has made and you both live in the same country that has strict copyright laws, there is a chance they could sue you on the actual court and outside of YouTube platform. So it is always advisable to read the copyright law of your country and keep an eye on whose content you're using to avoid any risks. I can't believe I had to talk so much about law in a video related to a tank.
He claims the video was in direct response to his video without naming it. Well, the answer is, video was in direct response to a post in Quora, which is appearing on screen right now. This post got answered in year 2016, which was way before the video which Red Effect posted came in. Link of the post is provided in the comment section. You can reference that. You will find striking resemblance between two, the post on Quora and the video of the Red Effect. And I think this is why he felt the video was in direct response to his video. Actually, there was a video in Bangla which I am unable to locate right now. And that was the premier motivation to do the first video.
Now, this is simply wrong. There are multiple reasons why I felt the video you made was in direct response to mine. The post on Quora makes some stupid remarks and lacks almost half of the things I mentioned in my video. The part about Arjun's development in your video was obviously not related to mine, but the rest is more than obvious. Post on Quora mentions bad mobility of the tank, while I say that the mobility is decent. In your video, you haven't mentioned mobility as being a problem at all. If you were responding to the post on Quora, you would have responded to the part about mobility. But that was not present in your video at all. Another reason why I believe it was a response to my video is because of the arguments I myself made and were in no relation to the post on Quora. Like saying how Arjun Mark II has a weak spot on the right side of the turret and how the side of the turret offers lower protection. And in the video you even used the image I made for my video only. If that's not a good enough proof, I don't know what it is. The post on Quora mentions the lack of blast door and blowout panels, while I never, neither in my first nor in the second video, have mentioned the lack of blowout panels. I never said that your video was a response to my video only, but my video was definitely a part of it because you were talking about the arguments that I made.
As per him, the second allegation is, I have not provided any documentation. Well, if you'll observe the video once again, you will understand that I have provided a CAD design and at the same time a slide from DRDO. These two documents were backing the claims which I made.
While I was talking about the lack of documentation, I clearly showed on the screen, except this slide, so people would know you at least provided something, but as someone who complained about references, the video surely lacked some.
However, when I went in and saw his video, there's no documentation backing the claims. It is purely assumption. However, in this video, we'll be providing you link, references, and text to back the claims.
Yeah, it lacked sources because I wanted to make fun of the statement you made in the first video, how the people criticizing Arjun don't care about referencing the sources. So I put no official document as reference because I don't care and a sad smiley face. I did provide several sources in the video in the same way you did, pictures of actual documentation. But in my original video and in all my other videos I put sources, and don't worry, I will put sources this time too.
While quoting my example of T-64 and T-72, he takes an example of M1 Abrams and quotes that the gun of Abram also changed, but the life cycle of the tank wasn't affected by that. Somewhere in 1960s, United States of America and Germany started working on a tank called MBT-70. This tank was equipped with 152 mm gun. Somewhere in 1971, this project was scrapped and funds from this project were channelized to M1 Abrahams. M1 Abrams also got benefited from the technology which was developed during MBT-70.
MBT-70, or KPZ-70 as you said, was a joint project between US and Germany to develop a new generation of the tank. The project failed because it was deemed way too expensive for its performance and technology advanced during its development, that such a design was no longer needed. But the tank has literally nothing to do with M1 Abrams. The funds were allocated, yeah, but that does not mean it is the same project at all. M1 was a completely new design and a completely new idea. MBT was supposed to be a tank used by multiple countries in the NATO pact. M1 was made to be a tank made for US. Of course, when you have money left from failed projects, you're going to use that money to start the new ones. And as I said, M1 and MBT-70 have little to nothing in common. Maybe some development ideas that were used during the development of MBT-70 were used to develop something for M1, but that is normal, of course, that you will use things you developed before to help you develop a new tank. That's just common sense. But that is not the main problem people have with Arjun. It could have taken 50 years to develop as far as everyone is concerned. What matters is that it took so long to develop that it was a really bad tank for its time, considering how long the development lasted. You want a proper comparison? T-14 Armata. T-14 first started as Object 195 during the Improvement 88 project that was started back in 1988. Of course, then it just started to be developed. During the 90s the development was doing well, and they were kind of finishing it up, and they made a couple of prototypes in the late 90s or early 2000s. The project was quote-unquote cancelled in 2010, but it wasn't really. They made changes to it and T-14 came to be in 2015. So that is almost 30 years. Do you know what's the difference between T-14 and Arjun? T-14 is an excellent tank with latest technology. On top of that, it's a unique design that took years to make right, because it's not easy to make a tank with a remotely operated turret function properly. That's why it wasn't really possible to do so in the past. Arjun, when it came out, was really bad. I have to say that Arjun Mark II upgrade gave Arjun a lot of modern features, but pretty much all of that already existed when Arjun entered service, and Arjun Mark I was decades behind the modern tanks of the time. That is why people have a problem with its development. 30 years is not that big of a deal. What is what came out after those 30 years of development.
Now going back to the example which I gave it last time, the T-64 and T-72. He kinda disagreed with me and then says the requirement on T-64 was changed. Well, that's what I was trying to say. During the life cycle of MBT Arjun, the GSQR were changed 5 times. Between the year 1972 and 1996, Indian Army changed its requirement 5 times. And every time there was a change in requirement, designers had to go on the drawing board again. It was only in year 1996 that Government of India decided to mass produce this tank. Which eventually made the engineers go back to the drawing board once again. MBT Arjun was the first tank which India developed. However, both T-72 and T-64 were developed in Soviet Union. If the argument that the tank was developed by other company, thus they did not take the advantage of the technologies which were achieved while working on the previous versions or the prototype is not believable.
What? The point being made was that although the requirements changed, the tank took pretty short time to develop. You used T-64 as a timeline for T-72 development, claiming how the development period matches with Arjun, and now you say something completely different. You claimed how T-64 took some years to develop, but then T-72 was a continuing of that project and somehow was in development until it entered service. You claimed in your original video how T-72 was a direct evolution of T-64. Well, that was completely wrong. As I said in my previous video, both T-64 and T-72 were used at the same time all until the end of USSR, with various upgrades made to them during their lifespan. That is the second argument that I made. T-64 and T-72 had pretty short development periods, and after they were adopted, they were continuously upgraded with things like armor, firepower, etc., being completely changed. I mean, look at Merkava for example. When it came out, it was a simple tank with steel armor and a 105mm gun. But today it is a fully modern tank with thick composites and 120mm spoon-to-bore gun. Merkava was also the first tank Israel made, and it featured little to no modern technology of that era, but they improved on it continuously and added up for today a modern tank. Why I brought up Merkava is because India could have done the same thing, make a tank much earlier and keep upgrading it, no matter how bad it actually could have been.
Now let's talk about the question which he raised twice during the video, the question about the logistics. He asked why make a tank which creates a logistical problem. In short, he meant why did not India made an Russian philosophy tank, a smaller, less powerful, 3-crew tank with an autoloader.
I did not mean that, excuse me. As I explained in the video, if you are making a new tank, you need to make a decision to prioritize that tank. If logistics are the problem, why develop such a tank in the first place? Every country has at one point changed from one design to another. It is simply a problem of making a decision. The problem here is that Arjun is not good enough to make such a decision. It is simply not worth it. And India has not made such a decision. They signed a contract with Russia to domestically produce T-90 tanks until 2028. You don't do that if you have logistical issues with your best tank. India is planning on upgrading their T-72 tanks as well, not to mention that there are plans on procuring more modern 125mm ammunition from Russia. If you have logistic problems with your tank, you need to prioritize in fixing those issues.
So the next topic of discussion is the sight of Arjun tank, the so-called cut in the turret. There are two ways by which we can discuss about this. One is using the dimensions of Arjun and make assumption. That can be done with the help of a CAD diagram.
As I provided evidence in my video, you can clearly see that the armor extension is visible in Leopard 2A4, while it is not in Arjun. What more is there to discuss?
But looking at his last video, the way he reacted to the engineering drawing, also his background, he told me in the comment that he has a degree in law from law school. Thus using engineering drawing and advanced techniques like pixel mapping will not go anywhere. So I'll be parking this topic here and try getting in someone from DRDO to answer this question for us. However, in days to come, I'll be doing pixel mapping for my usual subscribers.
Pixel mapping? Excuse me, you drew a random red block on the tank's diagram. That is definitely not pixel mapping. And what does me having a law degree have to do with pixel mapping? This is taken completely out of context. I mentioned I have a law degree because I was trying to explain to you how the law of fair use works, and that I probably know how that all works. Was that an attempt on trying to discredit me? Did you want to pull something like, oh, he isn't an engineer or he isn't a tanker, therefore he knows nothing? Well, let me just tell you that you know absolutely nothing about me. I shared one thing about me and that is it. You probably don't even know where I'm from. So it is wrong to assume all of that based on one fact. So again, you like to assume things. And by the way, there is a thing called sources. You can read and look at those no matter your background. Also please, I'm sick of people saying how they have some contacts in companies, etc. I met a good portion of them. Unless you have actual evidence that there is an armor extension behind the sight that is almost as thick or as thick as Leopard's, don't even bother. Or I mean, if your contact can prove that he or she is from DRDO and do have access to such evidence, it would be also nice, since not everyone who works for those companies has access to such information. But if they truly are related to Arjun, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people, including myself, would be interested to hear about the tank.
So the next one is armor coverage and his famous drawing where he compares Leopard 2 with Arjun 1. As per the claim, the coverage of Leo 2 is 180 degree, whereas the coverage of Arjun MBT is just 120 degree, with 60 degree on either side. As per the claim, the boxes which are highlighted in yellow are hollow blocks for the storage. I haven't got any text that is backing this claim, so I'll leave this one to him to prove. But one thing we should understand here, if these blocks are storage, and in Arjun Mark 1A there's an additional set of storage over these, then how much storage does a tank requires? Is this a tank or train? Was it developed for Indian Army or Indian Railways?
Guess then that Abrams is a train?
Based on the confirmation from one of the source, these wedges are not hollow blocks.
What source?
Logically, there is no point of having a hollow block around the turret of any tank. These wedges are add-on passive composite armor. These passive armors are designed to provide additional protection against heat ammunition, hollow and shaped charges, and anti-tank guided missiles.
The main reason why I suspected those as storage containers is the very slide you used yourself. You definitely don't mark NERA package like that. And I let my engineer friend analyze the things you call the NERA packages, and there is more evidence that those are not. Let's take a look. The thing on the side has locks on them, something you don't put on NERA package. There are also these two metal bars that are welded on the box and have hinges where they are connected to the turret. This would mean that they can be lifted upwards. NERA packages weigh hundreds of kilos or even a ton or more. If that was NERA, it would be pretty questionable how would you lift it upwards on those hinges. The metal on the box also appears relatively thin. As evident in this screenshot, you can see clear warps on the plate. This would be impossible to happen on thicker steel. This suggests that the box is well under 5mm thick, and the NERA blocks need to be much thicker because even some rockets, like RPG ones, can penetrate some amount of steel just from their own kinetic energy, so that would be useless. There is also a tube leading from the box on the turret. It has a special kind of fitting used for liquids, so it can either be a water tank or oil. Water would make a lot more sense since EDA has a hot climate and extra water would be a great idea. And it has a tube leading into the turret so the crew can have access to a lot of water without even leaving the vehicle. Of course, it doesn't have to mean that both boxes are filled with water completely. It can be either one or one portion of them. Of course, not all of this can guarantee that those are not NERA blocks, but the evidence doesn't really go in that favor, and if someone can, with hard evidence, prove what those boxes actually are, that would be really good.
Let's move further to ammunition bin. In first video, Red Effect says that the ammunition bin of Arjun tank do not have blast door and thus it has zero protection. However, in second video, he says that the canisterized ammunition bin are not that safe, and if multiple ammunitions are hit, then the loader will not survive. Well, here are two things. The first one is the canisterized bin of Arjun conceals the fire, and even if one ammunition is hit, the fire doesn't travel to the second one. While in blast door type of setup, ammunition are not separated from each other, so if one ammunition is hit, chances of other getting fire are really very high. The second part is, in the case provided by him, the fire from enemy tank has penetrated armor, ammunition bin, and even individual canisters. Then in case of blast door type of setup, what are the chances of the same enemy fire hitting the blast door itself?
What sense does this make, honestly? What was so hard to understand about my point? If a tank is hit from the side, the projectile would penetrate several ammo bins. Those are not protected with thick armor. Those serve to contain fire, and if you penetrate an entire line of projectiles, you would break the seal between them. Thus, the fire would spread over the tank and potentially killing the loader and the rest of the crew. The point of blast doors is for the entire ammo rack to be destroyed. The way blast doors with blowout panels combination work is that once the ammo has been hit, the fire looks for the nearest exit, and because the ammo is completely sealed by the blast doors, the fire pops the blowout panels open since the pressure builds up inside of the ammo storage, and thus the fire can burn out of the blowout panels without injuring the crew. The way this is done in Arjun tank is that you have seal for each individual projectile. And let's say, for example, one projectile has been fired and now we have an empty rack, and your tank gets hit from the side with the penetrator going through several containers of ammunition. The seal breaks between them and puts the crew in greater risk. And if you have an empty bin, the fire would be sucked inside and would burst out right into the loader's face. I mean, rest of the crew can be fine, but this sort of ammo safety is far less safer than blast doors. The reason why blast doors are less likely to be hit is because it can only be hit if you hit a tank at a steep angle, and with a composite armor and even ERA on the side, at steep angles that can prove to be extremely difficult to penetrate. And when hit from the side, it is virtually impossible to achieve that. Besides, if you were penetrating blast doors, from that angle you would penetrate the bins as well, so blast doors, no matter what, are safer than containerized ammunition.
The next one is 120 rifled gun of Arjun MBT. The claim from Red Effect is that the gun of Arjun MBT is rifled and thus it has more wear and tear. Because of this wear and tear, the life of the barrel is lesser when compared to smooth bore. Well, this largely depends on metallurgy of the gun.
It does depend, but if you made smoothbore gun with the same stuff you made the rifled one with, you would have greater lifespan on the smoothbore one.
The bore and chamber are electroplated with chromium to give it an extended life.
All modern tank guns are chromed.
A typical barrel of Arjun MBT can fire 500 charges against 250 of T-72. The data is taken from reference and the reference document is provided in the description section. If the data from Wikipedia is to be believed, then Challenger can fire 400 effective full charges. The data here is Arjun MBT Mark 1. The Mark 1A has a better barrel and thus it is believed the effective charges of Arjun Mark 1A will be even more.
Excuse me, what? 250 by T-72? What T-72 exactly? Because the standard back in USSR was 600 rounds lifespan, and since they started chroming their guns, they increased the lifespan up to 1200 projectiles. 1200 is more than twice than the Arjun's 500. So, those could be the figures for the Indian old T-72s, which, as I mentioned in my previous video, were really bad. But for modern T-72s, that's not the case. And US 120mm M256 has up to 1500 rounds lifespan, which is 3 times as much. So my point still stands, smoothbore guns do have a longer lifespan than rifled ones. I wanted to note that while editing the video, I found information about APF-SDS lifespan of various tank guns. And for 2A46-1, the gun used by T-72A, it's less than 300, but that is firing APF-SDS. As I explain later in the video, APF-SDS is considered as overpressure ammunition, and the guns always have shorter lifespan firing APF-SDS than other full pressure rounds. Abrams, for example, has 1500 with full pressure ammunition, and has 700 when firing older APF-SDS. Modern T-72's gun is stated to have more than 500 when firing APF-SDS, compared to 1200 with full pressure ammunition. Most modern Abrams ammo reduces the lifespan immensely because of its overall performance. As he notes himself, Challenger and Arjun have from 4 to 500 rounds lifespan firing full pressure ammunition. Firing APF-SDS would reduce the lifespan a lot.
Next is ammunition. Before talking about ammunition, let me tell you the image which is appearing on the screen is a representative image. The idea of taking representative image is to let people know that you cannot pick any available picture on internet. There are certain things which are copyrighted and you should respect that. And that's where representative images are used.
If you listened to what I was talking about at the beginning of the video, you would know that using someone else's image to make videos like these is completely fine. If it was the case, as he is saying, majority of YouTube channels wouldn't even exist, because every picture is an ownership of the person who made or took the picture. But since the law of fair use exists, you're completely free to use pictures other people made, as long as, of course, the implementation of those falls under the fair use.
There's one more thing we should understand before talking more about ammunition of Arjun MBT. The Quora post which I was talking about is of 2016, and those who copied that information without any references have done a big mistake. The only thing which I want to say to Red Effect for ammunition of Arjun MBT is you know nothing, Jon Snow.
Is that a Game of Thrones reference?
In year 2017 itself, the user trial of FSAPDS MK2 were done. During the test, it was found that the ammo can go up to the depth of 500 mm.
I'm well aware of the information about the MK2 APF-SDS, but here is the problem. The information about it only states that it has been tested. No information about it that I could find ever mentions MK2 entering actual service and full-scale production. It might as well have been, but still 500mm in 2017? That is again extremely pathetic. Projectiles that could achieve such penetration were developed back in the 80s, and projectile from early 90s already exceeded those capabilities. Another problem is that India has logistic problems with Arjun, and one of those problems is ammunition. Even if MK2 did enter service, there is still a chance that majority of the projectiles are Mk1 with 300mm of penetration.
Since 2017, DRDO is also working on ammo that can achieve a penetration depth of 800 mm.
800mm? What a load of BS. I tried finding the reference to this in the provided sources, but managed to find nothing. No new projectiles with 800mm of penetration being under development at all. That is way too much for such a gun, and the projectile with such penetration would produce massive pressure, and since the current lifespan is 500 rounds, keep in mind that gun barrel lifespan is not measured with APFSDS, since those are actually considered as overpressure rounds, and would produce even shorter lifespan than the full pressure rounds. Now imagine, if APFSDS already produces a shorter lifespan, how short of a lifespan would it be with a projectile that would produce that much penetration? Probably less than 100. There is a reason why Germany had to move from their L55 gun to L55A1 with increased pressure resistance for developing a new DM73 projectile that is supposed to have over 800mm of penetration. L55 could already sustain a lot of pressure, and L55A1 can sustain even more. And the Arjun's gun is nothing like L55A1. If such a projectile is to be developed in India, they would need a new gun.
Now let's talk about T90. He suggests moving from T series of tank to Arjun is not even worth it. Well, answer to that is, no decision is made in silos. When you make decisions on defense procurement, that is also based on what your enemy has. The T series of tank are more than enough against something like Al-Khalid. However, situation would have been different if Pakistan could have acquired Abrams. It would have been really interesting to see if Indian Army would have gone for T series of tank against Abrams.
I suggested that Arjun is not good enough of a tank to make a decision if the logistics are a problem. And India, as I said, is still producing T90 tanks and upgrading their T72 tanks. So this argument is completely invalid. So at the end, Arjun is not a really good tank, at least it is not good when compared to other modern tanks. Is it better than T90S? Possibly is. I mean, the ammo they use for their T90 tanks has 500mm of penetration. Again, Arjun Mk2 is possibly better than T90S, but that does not mean it doesn't have problems. Yes, I agree, weight and logistics are indeed a problem, but the other issues that I talked about should also be heavily considered. And that would be all. As I said, I will probably not make any more replies to Alpha Defense, unless some hard evidence comes up about the things we discussed in these videos. If that happens, I will probably make a community post about it or something, in order to update all of you. I hope you enjoyed. If you like my content, you can consider supporting me on Patreon, and if not, leave a like on the video or subscribe if you are new. It also helps a lot. And I'll see you all in the next video. Have a nice day.